Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are hitting the brakes. We are really slamming them on. Usually when we talk about caregiving or parenting or really just sharing a life with anyone, we tend to focus on the highlight reel, the milestones.
The big wins.
Yeah.
The first steps, the graduation ceremonies, the golden anniversary parties, the stuff you frame and put on the mantelpiece.
Exactly. But today we are looking at a source that argues those moments are, well, they're actually the least important parts of a life. We're unpacking an essay titled What Remains by the writer and philosopher Pedro Malha. And I have to be honest with you, reading this, it didn't make me feel warm and fuzzy. It actually made me feel a little uncomfortable.
Uncomfortable is a good place to start with Malha. He isn't interested in the greeting card version of human connection.
No.
He's interested in what he calls the slow accumulation of presence. He argues that the true substance of caregiving isn't the event, it's the residue left over when the event is finished.
And that is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to explore the invisible, the repetitive, and frankly, the exhausting texture of caring for another life.
Yeah.
Whether that's a child, a partner, or an aging parent. We really need to figure out why Malha thinks the most profound parts of love are the ones that look the most like, well, drudgery.
It is a philosophical look at the grind, essentially.
Yeah.
And Malha starts by just dismantling what he calls the myth of the moment.
Right. He points out that we have this cultural addiction to narrating our lives as a series of peaks, these big turning points.
And then everything changes.
Yes, exactly.
Narrative demands peaks.
Yes.
But lived reality it's mostly flat. Malha argues that if you actually track the hours of a life spent caring for someone, the milestones are, they're statistically insignificant. They're tiny blips.
And the vast majority of the experience is just maintenance.
It is.
He lists these examples that are almost painfully mundane. Mornings that blur into one another, the same breakfast, the same struggle to find shoes, or the nights. And he's not talking about the dramatic ambulance calling nights. He's talking about the nights interrupted in the exact same way, late at night or in the early hours, over and over and over again.
And that repetition is the core mechanic here. It's not just with children either. Think about caring for a parent with dementia.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same question asked 10 times in an hour. Or even living with a partner. It's the same debate about whose turn it is to do the dishes.
And usually we look at that repetition as the filler. It's the stuff we have to get through to get to the good parts. But Malha flips that.
He flips it completely. Yeah. He suggests that over time, these repetitions, they stop being distinct events. You stop remembering that one time I made lunch. They just dissolve into what he calls a texture.
A texture.
They become the background radiation of your life.
I do like the word texture, but let's play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't that just a poetic way of saying boredom or labor? If I'm just repeating the same task until I die, that sounds pretty bleak.
And Malha acknowledges the bleakness. He doesn't shy away from it at all.
Yeah.
But he argues that this texture is where the actual relationship lives. He defines what remains, not as a reward you get at the end, but as the quiet persistence of care that has lost its novelty.
Ooh, losing the novelty. That really stuck out to me because in the beginning of any relationship, a new baby, a new romance, everything is novel.
Everything. Every sound is a signal.
And novelty is easy.
Novelty gives you dopamine. Malha is interested in what happens when the dopamine runs dry, when it's just what you do.
Right.
And he describes this strange paradox where a life of caregiving feels incredibly full, your schedule is packed, but it also feels strangely empty.
The work continues, but much of it leaves no visible trace. That line hit hard.
Well, think about the physics of it. You prepare a meal, it is eaten, you wash the plate, you put it away. Visually, the room looks exactly the same as it did 3 hours ago.
It's like it never happened.
It never happened. You soothe the child's fear in the afternoon. That fear comes back in a new shape in the evening.
Yeah.
You soothe it again.
It's like shoveling snow while it's still snowing.
Exactly. And there is no trophy for that. There is no evidence you did anything other than the fact that the people in your house are still alive and, relatively sane.
Right.
Malha writes, what remains is not proof. It is familiarity.
Is familiarity enough, though? We're wired to want progress. We want to see the graph go up. Familiarity feels like a consolation prize.
In our economy, maybe.
Yeah.
But in a relationship, familiarity is the bedrock of safety. It's the unspoken knowledge that care has been given, and this is the crucial part, that care will be given again.
Okay.
It creates this prediction model in the other person's brain that says, I am safe here. that safety is invisible, but it's heavy.
That brings us to the weight Mala describes, and he's very specific about this weight. He says it's not heavy because it's painful or tragic.
It's heavy because it settles into the body. It actually changes your center of gravity. He talks about an orientation that never switches off.
This is the part I really wanted to unpack. He describes it as being sort of shaped around another life, even when that person isn't in the room.
Even when they aren't in the house.
It reminds me of how your phone battery drains faster if it's constantly searching for a signal. Even if you aren't making a call, you're always running a background process.
It's a perfect analogy. Mala calls it the shape the world has taken after being organized around another life. If you are a parent, you are always listening for a specific pitch of cry or a silence that lasts just a little too long. If you are caring for an ill spouse, you are attuned to the rhythm of their breathing from 3 rooms away.
And you can't just turn that off. You can't clock out.
You can physically leave, but the orientation remains. Your attention is permanently tethered. And that leads to Mala's redefinition of intimacy.
Right.
We usually think of intimacy as, deep conversations, eye contact, spark.
The movie
A
version.
movie version. But Mala says intimacy is attention given repeatedly. It is practical. It is knowing data points you never intended to memorize.
Like knowing which floorboard creaks so you don't wake them up. Or knowing exactly how they like their toast.
Or knowing that a certain hesitation in their voice means they are afraid but won't admit it. You don't learn that from a deep conversation. You learn that by watching them 10,000 times. Mala argues this bond exists regardless of the mood. It persists through conflict.
That's an interesting distinction because usually if you're fighting with someone, it feels like the intimacy is gone, like the bond is broken.
Mala disagrees. He says parenting, and I'd argue any deep caregiving, creates a bond that is not contingent on ease. The orientation holds even when you are furious. You might be angry at the child or the partner, but if they fell down the stairs, your body would move before your brain decided to forgive them.
The body knows. But there's a flip side to this deep orientation, and that's fear. Moss spends a significant chunk of the essay discussing fear, but not in the way I expected.
Yeah.
He doesn't talk about it as something to be conquered.
We treat fear like a pathology, like, oh, you're an anxious parent, you need to relax. Mala suggests that fear is simply the shadow of attention. You cannot have one without the other.
He calls it the unknown contours of a life unfolding.
As a caregiver, you realize very quickly how little control you actually have. You can feed them and clothe them, but you can't protect them from the world or from their own future choices or from time.
Right.
And that lack of control manifests as a low-level, humming dread.
So the fear isn't a bug, it's a feature.
It's a force that sharpens attention. If you didn't care, you wouldn't be afraid. So Malha argues we should stop trying to fix this anxiety and just recognize it as part of the texture.
It's the price of admission.
It is.
Which, honestly, that takes the pressure off. I don't have to be the chill, zen-like caregiver.
Right.
My worry is just proof that I'm doing the job.
It is part of the pattern. And pattern is the word he uses to replace love.
This is where I think some listeners might get defensive. He basically strips the romance out of love entirely. He calls it a commitment enacted through repetition.
It sounds cold on the surface, but think about it. Feelings are weather. They change every hour. If your care depended on you feeling loving, your people would be in a lot of trouble.
Especially in the early hours of the morning when nobody wants to be awake.
Mala says love is showing up when enthusiasm is at 0, when patience is gone, when you are bored out of your mind.
Yeah.
Love, in this context, is not an experience so much as a pattern. It is reliability.
But this pattern, it changes the person doing it. And this is the section of the essay that I felt was the most difficult to grapple with. The reshaping of the self.
This is the existential cost of care.
Mala describes a gradual erosion, or maybe erosion is too negative, a reshaping of the parent's personality. Priorities shift, not because you decided to be a better person, but because you had to survive.
You learn patience because the alternative is madness. You learn to function on less sleep because you have no other choice.
But he talks about a contraction of freedoms, and I feel like we need to pause here, because there is a real grief in that, isn't there? The loss of spontaneity, the loss of the person you were before you were responsible for this other life.
There is absolutely grief, and Malha validates that. He says parts of the self become less accessible because they are no longer central. You can't just walk out the door. You can't just decide to spend your Saturday how you want.
And in our culture, which is all about living your truth and self-actualization, that sounds like a failure. It sounds like losing yourself.
Malfa argues it's not a loss of self, but a relocation of the self.
Hmm.
He says this contraction doesn't need to be justified. It's not a tragedy, and it's not a noble martyrdom to brag about on social media.
You're right.
It is simply the trace of having been responsible for another life,
Like the indentation on a pillow.
or the way a tree grows around a fence. The tree isn't broken, but its shape is permanently altered by the presence of the obstacle. You are permanently altered by the presence of the person you care for.
So if parent or caregiver isn't an identity you wear, what is it?
It's a process. Mala insists that we stop looking at it as a badge. I am a parent. No. You are a person who is currently enacting a series of commitments.
And that's liberating. How?
Well, it's liberating because it makes room for failure. If parenting is a static identity, I'm a good mother, then one mistake shatters that identity.
Right.
But if it's a process, a texture, then mistakes are just part of the weave. Regrets, lost tempers, bad days, they don't cancel out the care. They are just part of the shared history.
That is a much more forgiving way to look at it. But I want to talk about the weirdest part of the essay for me, the temporal dimension, the time travel
A
stuff.
collapse of time.
Yeah.
Yes.
He says caregiving collapses time. When I first read that, I thought he meant, the days go fast, but he means something more. Hallucinogenic.
He's talking about how your brain processes time when you are raising a child or caring for family. It's like a double exposure in photography.
Explain.
You are looking at your child right now in the present, but simultaneously, you are constantly hallucinating their future, worrying about who they will be. Will they be happy? Will they be safe?
Mm-hmm.
And at the exact same time, their behavior is triggering memories of your own childhood, the past.
So you're standing in the kitchen, but you're actually existing in 3 timelines at once.
Yeah, you're just trying to make a sandwich. It's incredibly disorienting. Mala says we carry time in multiple directions at once. It's cognitively expensive. It's why you can feel mentally drained even if you've just been sitting on the floor playing blocks.
And as the child grows, or as the person you care for changes, that time shifts. Which brings us to the hardest transition Mala describes, the letting go. But he doesn't call it letting go.
No, because letting go implies you stop caring. He talks about a shift in the nature of the orientation. As a child grows, direct involvement lessens. They don't need you to put their shoes on. They don't need you to soothe every fear.
But the orientation, the phone, searching for the signal, that doesn't stop.
It never stops. And that is the pain of it. You remain attuned to them, but you are no longer the central gravity of their world. Malha writes that the goal is presence that does not demand relevance.
Presence that does not demand relevance. Wow.
Yeah.
That is incredibly hard.
It is the ultimate discipline of love. To be there,
Yes.
to be solid, to be the net, but to accept that you are not the main character in the story anymore.
You're the setting.
You're the setting, yes.
It seems like that requires a suppression of ego that most of us just aren't ready for. We want to be relevant. We want to be the hero who fixes the problem.
But the texture Mala talks about isn't heroic, it's supportive. He even mentions the silences, the things you don't say, the advice you swallow because you know they need to figure it out, the criticism you hold back. Those silences aren't empty. They're an active form of care.
So we've stripped away the milestones. We've accepted the boredom. We've acknowledged the fear and the loss of self. What are we left with? I mean, how does Malha land this plane?
He brings it back to visibility. He knows that everything we've discussed, the invisible work, the mental load, the repetitive, crushing boredom, it goes unseen by the world.
And often unseen by the people we are caring for.
Exactly. So Malha's conclusion is that what remains is not wisdom you can package. It's not a solution. It is simply the ongoing presence of the relationship itself. And he ends with a plea, effectively. He says, this remaining does not ask to be celebrated. It asks to be seen.
It asks to be seen.
We spend so much energy trying to validate our lives through achievements. Look, my kid got into this college. Look, I was a perfect spouse, Malha's saying. Stop. The value isn't in the trophy. The value is in the fact that you stayed.
You stayed through the repetition. You stayed through the reshaping of yourself.
Seeing it doesn't make it easy. It doesn't make the early hours any less exhausting. But it dignifies it. It acknowledges that this invisible texture is the life.
It's not the waiting room for the life.
This is it.
It reminds me of looking at a tapestry. From the front, it's a picture. But if you turn it over, it's just thousands of knots and messy threads. Malha is telling us to look at the knots and say, this is the work. This matters.
The milestones are just the punctuation marks. The care is the sentence. And the sentence is long and run-on and repetitive,
Yeah.
but it's the only story we have.
So for everyone listening, and I'm thinking specifically of the people who feel like they are drowning in the mundane right now, maybe you're caring for a sick parent and you've answered the same question 50 times today. Maybe you're in the trenches with a toddler.
Or maybe you're just holding space for a partner going through a hard time.
Malha's essay is a witness to that. It's a validation that the weight you are feeling isn't because you're doing it wrong, it's because you're doing it right.
The weight is the proof.
So I want to leave you with a thought to carry into your week. If we stop waiting for the highlight reel, if we stop judging our relationships by the big photogenic moments, what is actually there?
Look at the person across the table from you. Look at the boring stuff. The way you hand them a coffee without asking. The way they know when you're tired.
What is the texture of your relationship? What is the quiet, repetitive accumulation of care that you have stopped noticing simply because it is always there?
That might be where the real love is hiding. In the things you're bored of.
Pedro Mala's What Remains. A tough read, but a necessary one. Thanks for diving deep with us.
See you next time.